So thank you for staying late on this long conference day. So we'll get us started. Um, so my name is Nelson Alfaro Rivas. I am a simulation consultant with MOSIMTEC. So MOSIMTEC is a modeling and simulation consulting firm. So we focus exclusively on modeling and simulation work. We like to say we live and breathe simulation every day, as opposed to maybe some other companies where simulation might be a side project that's done once or twice a year. We do it year round, so we like to say our skills are always staying sharp. In a previous life, I was an aerospace manufacturing engineer for Department of Defense tech programs before transitioning to consulting work with MOSIMTech. Since I've joined the MOSIMTech team, I've enjoyed solving business questions and providing mentoring services across a range of different industries, from retail and fast food to supply chain and logistics, even from nuclear manufacturing and mining. So just a host of different problem spaces. So never really know what you're going to get. Some days I could be modeling a drive-through or could be doing picking operations in a warehouse. So let's move on to this project. So due to a non-disclosure agreement, so NDA, I can't share the exact client, but for this case study, our client was one of the largest convenience store chains in North America. When I say largest, I mean over a thousand stores. So in the industry, convenience stores are known as C stores, and it's a large industry. So there's over 150,000 C stores in the United States. And this project, like many other consulting projects, started because our client wanted to increase revenue. So generalizing a little bit, 80% of C stores are selling fuel. And for those stores that are selling fuel, that fuel constitutes about 60 to 70% of that store's revenue, but fuel is low margin. So what a lot of these C stores want, what they desire, is to entice customers to enter the store and spend money on the higher margin products that are inside. So traditionally and historically, the industry called the inside products smokes and cokes. So tobacco products were high margin, and so were soda products. But reality was that anything from chips, candy bars, all that was typically sold. But in the modern age, the younger demographics aren't really buying as much of tobacco or the other foods that are seen as junk foods. So the younger clients kind of are demanding healthier options. So our client responded by pivoting to selling fresh foods, and that's been kind of a common theme across the C-store industry, appealing to younger clients. And it kind of works out well for the C-stores because the fresh food products are typically higher margin, so that higher margin makes up for declining revenue from other product categories. So the fresh food gives people a reason to enter the store instead of just leaving at the pump. And at least here in North America, these C-store chains are learning from other chains in Europe and Asia that have successfully implemented fresh food sales. Um, and yeah, so let's get started kind of talking about some of the challenges. So that's a little bit of the motivation, but actually pivoting and making this a reality, it's hard. Just the scale of our client makes the problem complicated. It makes everything complicated. So there's hundreds of stores with different layouts and vastly different volumes and clienteles. Just to give you an example, how do you even begin to compare a store that is in metro New York City with one that's in rural Kansas? Even when you're trying to, from layouts to customer volumes, and even when you're trying to decide, all right, I'm going to sell fresh food. Well, the type of fresh food you sell in, let's say, New Orleans is going to be different than something that you would offer in San Francisco. So that's going to affect everything from the equipment that you're going to choose. And then let's say simplistically, all of your stores were to need the exact same equipment, where do you go to get, let's say, 1,500 ovens off of the shelf? Even just procuring that equipment is a logistical mountain that needs to be climbed. And then even then picking specifically the operational challenges of new equipment. So part of the effort for this for equipment was higher quality fresh food. So think, hey, replacing maybe microwaves that were being used in stores with air fryers. So yes, it's higher quality, but it's also slower operationally. So you might it presents its own challenges that are concerning. Um, and then on top of that, our in the effort to modernize, our client was introducing an app and a loyalty program. So not just introducing new food, but committing to availability of this food via delivery partners like Uber Eats and DoorDash, which adds additional complexity in a time of uncertainty. And then lastly, one of the other features that they were excited about was the introduction of customer self-checkout. So think of that almost like a scan and go functionality, which they were touting was going to be convenient for customers. And they were saying that the goal would be to save labor for cashiers. So, hey, if the customer checks out, that's a customer that the clerk does not have to check out. So those are some of the just the first challenges, but additionally, other challenges are just a little bit more abstract. So on the customer side, I I've never personally heard somebody say, oh, hey, like where am I think a gas station is my first go-to where I think of getting fresh food. So the reality is, at least here in North America, after years of seeing hot dogs, pizza, chips, that perception, it's kind of hard to undo it. So part of the reason why they were introducing the app is to offer promotions, offer specials, and get people to rethink about that perception of what kind of food is being sold in these C stores. And then lastly, and probably one of the hardest parts of this project was kind of garnering support from franchisees. So, and part of the background about this client is as a corporate entity, they each of the stores is essentially independently owned and operated by franchisees who operate under the client banner. So just to give you a number, 50 to 60% of these stores are franchised by a single store operator, meaning that those single store operators are not running multiple stores. They own one store, and that's usually how they make their living. They're usually working in the store. That store provides their livelihood. A lot of times they have family members working in the store. They're hyper focused and they're protective, right? That store, they're in there a lot of times 7 days a week. So just overall describing the challenges of making this fresh food initiative work. It's a monumental effort, multi-year long. So where does simulation come in? So simulation is a good tool for this project because it helps, it's uniquely positioned to address the randomness and variability. So between customers, employees, all kinds of different operational complexities. Um, it's way better than a Excel tool because it can accurately predict store performance in the face of all the different things that I've mentioned. Um, or to, and it's also kind of provides a sandbox environment that's relatively low cost and low risk. Our client gave us an example of in the past when they'd considered doing drive-throughs on their convenience stores. They had previously just went to a store and just slapped a drive-through on a convenience store. So this doing a simulation is just a way better alternative. And then especially for franchisees, it provides an analytical approach to addressing some of their concerns. Like a lot of the times they want to know, hey, if I put more money in the form of labor hours into my store, will I actually see a return on that investment? So we, uh, especially the client and us, we wanted to deliver an analytical approach and say, yes, here are the numbers as to why this is worth a worthwhile investment, and kind of garner that partnership between the corporate side and the franchisees. So what did we include in the model? So um, essentially we had a flexible virtual store that was configurable via Excel inputs. So pretty much everything about the store was flexible, including the layout, the product zones. So where we put the candy bars, where we put the, let's say, the fresh food, where the soda was at, where the beer is at. That was all configurable. What food items were being sold, what equipment it was cooked on, everything about the store was flexible. Um, Retail items we included abstractly. We didn't, even though retail stuff wasn't the focus of the project, it needed to be included so that we had it as part of the holistic store system. Customer behavior was in there, so not just how many clients were arriving, what time of day, but what they were buying. And then lastly, and probably the focal point of this model, was the employee labor. So how many labor hours are people being scheduled, and what are they doing? How are the tasks being prioritized? Because most of the time at a convenience store, when you walk in, you see them checking out, but there's a host of different activities that are going on, from verifying deliveries to cleaning bathrooms, throwing out trash, and a lot of things that are happening as a response to customers, such as cleaning, and some other stuff that needs to be done at a certain time, such as whenever a delivery arrives, that are at preset intervals throughout the week. So I'm going to jump into a quick demo. So to kind of orient you in this generic C-store, this is the front door. The blue dots behind the counter are the employees, and the green dots that are um, kind of coming in and out are the customers. So this is essentially center of store, where you'd find the traditional chips, candy bars, some all those salty and sweet snacks. On the right is the fridge of drinks, where you would see beer, sports drinks, isotonics, sodas, and then a back wall of fountain drinks, coffee, and then some other food items and food items up here. And then kind of back here is a kitchen and extra storage area. So in this view, you can kind of see what I wanted to mention, why we picked AnyLogic. So in this overhead view, AnyLogic especially shines with the power of the pedestrian modeling. With the flexibility to, with our Excel inputs, we could change the layout, and then we were able to add in walls under our equipment and under our merchandising, so that pedestrians are not walking through the shelving, and it was realistic. We were able to, all on our product zone agents, to keep track of queuing and wait times, and all the different statistics that our stakeholders cared about. Additionally, it allowed us to identify kind of hotspots and congestion. So one of the things that our client was interested in had to do with how they were going to remodel and redo some of their coffee stations, because traditionally a lot of their stores were on drip coffee, so just like the regular coffee machines, but they're moving towards fancier bean to cup machines, where it might have like Colombian beans or light roasted beans or decaf. And so those are nice for the client, but they're going to take a lot more time, cause more congestion in certain areas, and the client wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be any kind of issue. So that's where the pedestrian library and the flexibility of AnyLogic helped out really, really, it worked out really well. So once again, can't really share specific numbers because of our NDA, but when we went to identify the meaningful the outputs, it was a collaborative exercise. So we went and actually were talking with the franchisees, and we know that they care about, because they're in their stores constantly, they care about labor hours, they care about how long the line is, how long customers are waiting. They have typically a very down to earth view of success, like very front and center, versus our client, the franchisors. They were a little more interested on, well, how did the fresh food initiative actually end up working out? What was, you know, was the food making money? How much waste was there? Were there any stockouts? How disruptive was the fresh food and making that fresh food to the rest of the operations within the store. And then lastly, as the project was going along, and because there's so many different layouts and a lot of questions around that, and the equipment and architecture team, they wanted to see, well, how well is the cooking equipment performing? What were was the holding equipment big enough? Or were there any congestion points? So all those different things we were able to measure. We did export results for easy viewing into a Power BI summary dashboard. So this is just dummy data, so it's not real data, but provides a view of how the client can kind of slice and dice some of their output data for ease of understanding. We worked this out with them, so this kind of aligns with how they're used to seeing their KPIs. So this kind of mirrors this simulated these simulated results um, mirrors how they see their actual data from their stores. And it's easy to understand because we went through all the metrics and made sure that they were defined as in the same way that they are in real life. Um, so before we jump to the final findings of this, wanted to kind of mention the importance of some of the learnings that we had along the way. So learnings from the journey. So um, one of the things that wanted to highlight is that we were able to build quite a bit of trust with the franchisees just by communicating a clear understanding of the pain points, being able to relate to them. Because like I said at the beginning, they're very protective of their stores. But when you can kind of relate to them and just communicate how you've been in their stores, you understand their struggles. When you can tell them about how, hey, I understand that mopping a floor is not the hardest thing in the world, but when you're being interrupted 20 times, it becomes a hassle, and it can be a lot more difficult than it seems. So once you can relate that to them, then they're trusting, and then once they have that trust, their wheels are spinning, and the franchisees were actually very strong advocates for simulation because once we explained what we were doing and had their trust, then they wanted to know, oh, well, how can we use the simulation to experiment with different schedules? How can we experiment with our different menu items, and how can we they were full of ideas, so that worked out really well. And then the other thing is that just along the way, investigating different questions that we had led to a lot of conversations around trade-offs, even for seemingly simple questions such as how much food to cook. Well, if you ask the merchandising team, so the merchandising team is the team responsible for deciding what items to sell and what and how many to keep on the shelf at any given time. Well, the merchandising team will tell you keep the shelves as full as possible because, having a full pizza looks that was just freshly cooked looks enticing to a customer and can help drive sales. But if you ask the franchisee, well, they want to keep the shelf like half full because in their experience they might throw a lot of food away, and they see that as waste, as dollars that they're dumping down the trash. So um, that even a simple question like how much food to cook is complex. Which cooking equipment is necessary? Well, that's going to be, well, do you ask some just stakeholders from different regions? How should tasks be prioritized? That in and of itself, if you ask franchisees from one store to one store, or if you ask the corporate representatives, they're going to have different answers. So it's all a game of trade-offs. Um, as far as what kind of results the model delivered, we showed that the fresh food initiative can be successful, and we say can be successful because it did require, right, that more labor, because what we found was that the franchisees were kind of scheduling a skeleton crew, so they were operating very, very lean. So I mean, it's to their advantage, right? A lot of them are single store operators. Every dollar that they're paying in labor, that's money that they're not taking home, so they're running really lean. And for these fresh food initiative for this fresh food initiative to be successful, you need to spend more time cooking, especially when you're doing food delivery. But at the end of the day, if that investment in labor was made, because fresh food has a higher margin than non-perishables, it can work. But that kind of highlighted, along with the next point of food delivery can be disruptive, is that if you start getting that much more food, it requires a little bit of like a mental shift. So, at what percentage of food sales does it start to do you start having to shift your mindset to more of a restaurant view than a store view? So we were having those conversations with the client, and it was very, very eye-opening. So yeah, food delivery can be disruptive if you have a ton of orders that all come in at the same time. So that's one of the discoveries that we had. And then lastly, self-checkout um, didn't have the impact that they hoped throughout the whole day, specifically because in the mornings, in the mornings, self-checkout worked great, but in the evenings, when a lot of sales are tobacco or alcohol, and just due to regulation, they have to check identifications for clients, so those sales are not eligible for self-checkout, and therefore um, those customers, even though they could theoretically use the app to do a self-checkout, it didn't work quite as well as they expected. So yeah, so before I go to my final questions, just wanted to say that yeah, this is a monumental effort by our client to just essentially transform their business. And there's a lot of other stuff going on behind the scenes, such as logistically, they're going to try to optimize some of their supply chains so that they can distribute some of those fresh food ingredients to these stores. But that's hopefully a project that will win in the future. So with that, I'll transition to any questions.